Board of Selectmen meeting Tuesday, May 15th. And we'll begin the open session with public input on items that are not on the agenda. If there's anyone here that has something they'd like to speak to, that's not on the agenda.
I'd just like to bring this forward and recognize all the guys. They won first place in the MDA cook-off, which we do this in lieu of doing the boot out on the street now.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Oh,
That
thank you.
boot thing was dangerous.
Guys won first place out of 17 departments. They cooked 6 turkeys, deep fried, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry,
All
cornbread.
dietetic.
Yeah, that's paleo. It's all paleo.
It was a full meal.
Where's our doggy bag?
I know.
Anyways, this is what they won first place.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
we
When did
just-
it happen?
It was March 26th.
How many competitors were there?
17 departments.
17?
Wow.
Oh,
That's pretty impressive.
Just about everybody in our department participated. It was a great turnout and a great night.
Great. Well, congratulations.
Congratulations.
yeah, really?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
So if we need any catering done, if anybody needs any catering, we can, especially
Yeah.
fried turkeys.
So much for women running the kitchen now.
Hey,
Guys have succeeded.
that
I
has
didn't
been,
say what
that's
help they
so
had. You know,
out of date.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda are announcements, and the first one has to do with water conservation continuation.
Now, for the last several years, I've been assigned this the task, so I'm going to read it quickly.
Last
because
one for the
I
year,
thought you
Jack,
just
I
stepped
promise.
up to the plate, Jack.
Yeah.
I have a, effective May 1, in accordance with the Wenham Water Use Restriction Bylaw, no sprinklers are allowed between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Hand watering is allowed. The mandatory water conservation is in effect from May 1 to September 30th every year and includes private wells. We would like to thank all residents for their understanding and cooperation. And those that, and this is not on my script here, but those that don't cooperate, we're monitoring it, and you're going to be fined. Is it $100 a day?
Yes, $100 a day.
$100 a day. And if that doesn't work, it's going to go up to 200 and 300. But, you know, we have to be fair. There's only a few people in town that don't pay attention to this, less than, say, 20, and that, but it's not fair to everybody else. Certainly in July and August, when the lawns burn up, like mine did a couple of years ago, and other people's have beautiful green grass, certain areas of West Wenham particularly, that, so we want to be fair to everybody and enforce this, and so we've got a procedure now that we can find, and the Water Department does monitor usage, and they can tell who's not doing it. In addition to walking, driving around 4 in the morning to see the sprinklers on. Anyway, please cooperate. We don't want to find anybody. We just want everyone to cooperate. And this is what I call stage 1, or whether we have a drought or not. It could rain like this for a month. We're still going to have this water ban because there's nothing to do with exactly how much rain we're getting. If we're in a drought situation, we have to go to what we call stage 2, or I call stage 2, which is basically there's no sprinklers at all, period, and you can only hand water between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m., which I'd say 2 out of the last 3 years we've had to move into that stage 2, as I call it, certainly by July, but hopefully if it goes like this every day,
Yeah,
we'll
really.
do that.
I can see these people out in their yards with flashlights trying to water at 2 in the morning.
Well, if you listen to the
Automatic.
conservationists, you shouldn't be watering in the daytime anyway. You should only water in the morning. So you water, between 6 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and at the sun and heat. So if you do it in late afternoon, evening, you're only promoting not weeds necessarily, but funguses. Indeed, in high-end residential areas, not too many in Wenham, you only see the water going on at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. You don't see it going on 3 o'clock in the afternoon, unless something's screwed up in their watering thing. Anyway, I'm done.
Okay.
I'll try to get shorter the next time as we go
Okay,
along.
I know that's one of your favorite subjects.
It is.
Or passionate about.
Yeah.
So our next announcement has to do with mosquito spraying and annual herbicide treatments of Keolis commuter services right-of-ways. Every year, Keolis commuter service does herbicide spraying on their right-of-ways along some of the lines. This is an annual process. This year, that spraying will occur between May 12th, has already begun, and June 17th. Keolis Commuter Services may also spray from August 4th to September 2nd. If any residents have concerns or questions about mosquito spraying in general, please feel free to contact the Board of Health at 978-468-5520 extension 4, or at permitting@wenhamma.gov, or go to the Board of Health page on the town website. So that's happening, I guess, as we speak. The next announcement, I guess I have two in a row here,
That's right.
has to do with the playground. We now have our Richard J. Brown Playground actually open, but we have a date for a ribbon cutting and rededication of that playground at Pingree Park, which is going to happen, rain or shine, I've been told, this Saturday. No,
Not this
not this Saturday. Oh,
Correct. New date.
that's
Breaking
actually a
news.
good, really good thing.
Because it's going to be raining.
Yeah. So it's Saturday, June 9th at 11 a.m. The Wenham Board of Selectmen invite you to an official ribbon cutting and rededication of the Richard J. Brown Playground. Please join us on June 9th at 11 as we honor the playground's namesake, acknowledge the efforts of the Friends of Pingree Park Playground, the Hamilton Wenham Recreation Department, and the Wenham DPW, and thank the many donors who made these new structures possible. So that's June 9th. Next we have
Yes.
blood drive.
The town of Wenham is going to be hosting or sponsoring a blood drive in conjunction with the American Red Cross. The blood drive is going to take place at the Hamilton Wenham Regional Library, 14 Union Street, first floor conference room. And this is going to be on Wednesday, May 23rd, so that's coming right up. And it's going to be from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. If you need further information, 1-800-733-2767, or visit redcrossblood.org and enter HW gives to schedule an appointment. Oh, get a scheduled appointment. So it's best to make an appointment many times, having donated blood myself, that way you don't have to wait. So take you right in there.
We hosted this for the first time in the fall, November, and had some really good feedback and turnout. And so we're trying to do this on a semi-annual basis now, depending on how the turnout goes this second time around. So.
Great. Okay, our next announcement has to do with the very important Memorial Day ceremony. I think you have that, Jack.
I do. Okay, by the way, the route and all of the particulars for this has been discussed and approved by the recently formed Veterans Committee, of which I'm a member, chaired by Dean Peterson, who does an outstanding job. And so that begins with 11:45 on Monday, May 28th, with the decoration of the Allen B. Cheese Memorial by the American Legion. The parade is going to form at 12:30 in the afternoon at the American Legion headquarters in Wenham, Council on Aging building. 1 o'clock, salute to colors, and then the parade route, I'm sure you're not going to remember what I'm about to say, but it's a little different than the past. We march east on School Street, if you know what east and west is, left on Perkins, left on Bruce Lane, left on Arbor, all lefts, where they will meet for a short ceremony at the Veterans Memorial, right behind the Civil War Memorial. Another short ceremony, then merge onto Main Street and continue on to the Wenham Cemetery. And that, I don't know what I'm supposed to read at the bottom here, Wenham Veterans Memorial Civil War Monument, the cemetery.
Just the stops, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a slightly shorter route in the past, and that it's well attended, both at the cemetery as well as on the way, particularly in town. And I don't know if our state senator and state rep is going to show up this year like they have in the past, but they've been invited, I know. Do we know if they're going to come?
I haven't heard back one way or another in terms
And Hamilton has a similar festivities, if you can call it that, and that in the morning.
Do we, you don't have to say who it is, but will we have a speaker at the?
Yes, we do.
ceremony? Great.
Oh, yeah.
I like that part. Okay. Anything else about that?
No.
Okay. The last announcement has to do with the Veteran Memorial's pool opening, and John has
Now
that.
now, this is the second year now. We've gone from winter to summer winter to spring to summer pretty quickly, but the Veterans Memorial Pool will be opening on Saturday, June 9th. The open swim hours of operation begin on June 9th to the 22nd, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. to 7:30, 11 a.m. on Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 7:30, and Sundays, 11 a.m. to 6:30. From June 23rd to August 19th, Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. to 7:30, Saturdays 11 a.m. to 7:30, and Sundays 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then August 20th to August 26th, they call it postseason. It's going to be daily from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you need more information, I'm sure the rec department can help you out. And also 978-626-5280.
I think you should read the next paragraph as well, John, where it says membership registration.
Oh, right.
That'd be
Okay,
helpful, I
membership,
think.
membership registration. Memberships are only available to residents of Hamilton and Wenham. Registration will open starting on Monday, March
It's been open for a
5th.
while.
Wow, okay. Membership may be made online or in person or over the phone. If the membership is not purchased in person, arrangements must be made with the Recreation Department to receive your passes. Under payments, memberships can be purchased via check, credit card, no cash. Drop-in fees can be paid at the pool and by cash or check.
So
Just-
Peter, what about my suggestion about having a midnight senior swim the second Saturday of the month? Did that go
I
anywhere?
don't think it went anywhere,
all right.
The
Jack,
only one
sorry.
who was going to go.
I didn't see it listed.
I will say,
invite my friends.
the fees from last year remain the
Oh, yeah,
same.
that was,
They did create two new, I guess, categories in terms of membership types. The first is they added a veterans membership,
Nice.
which is at the same rate as seniors, which is a reduced rate. And then they also added, based on last year's experiences, a caregiver pass.
oh, yeah.
Because obviously family or employees from out of town were having to pay the drop-in fee every time they came with kids, so they created those two, but otherwise the fees are the same.
Which I assume are on their site, HW Recreation
Yep.
site.
It is.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to reports. We have, I believe, a town administrator report.
I do. Just a few things. First is Enon 1. It's been a while since we talked about it.
Been a while
but
since we've seen it.
It has been. The good news is it's coming back to town very soon. You might have noticed there's some precast concrete sonotubes up the top of the hill. Those are going to be installed. The plan is next Monday, weather permitting, which will be the foundation for the prefab structure that Post Woodworking is building for us now. So it's a 12 by 28 foot structure. It's going to look a lot like the structure that was out back of the fire department for many years. But it's the foundation will be in next week, hopefully, and then the shed should be delivered in the next few weeks. Still waiting on a fixed date on that at this point. But then over the course of the summer, shed will be painted, landscaping installed, some signage put up, and the like. And then the plan right now is for Enon 1 to be delivered back by the folks at the museum up in Newbury for the parade, for our 375th parade
Cool.
on September 8th. So we'll be in the parade, and then we'll have a little ribbon cutting ceremony that afternoon. A couple other things. We had, you may recall, this has been a frequently talked about issue over the years. We got grant funding through Maya, through our insurance company for a risk management grant, and had to provide some local funding as well to have Bartlett Tree do an evaluation assessment of our street trees on our major roads in town, which they completed a month or so ago. And they looked at 300 trees in all. And I guess high level, there's a lot of work to be done. Basically, all of them either need to be pruned, and they recommended close to half of them, actually, based on their condition, should be removed. That being said,
Albie will roll over in his grave.
well, two things. One, the tree removal budget for next year is the same as it was this year, just over $25,000. We've been tried to do best we can to get us through and deal with, obviously, there were a lot of tree issues with all the weather this winter. $25,000 is never going to be enough to take down anything close to the amount of trees that we're talking about, so it's going to be a 5+ year plan in terms of removal. On the flip side of that, we've always talked about the importance of a planting plan as opposed to just continued removal. There's no funding for planting in the budget this year, but at this point, I plan to sit down with Beltayak and Will Mulry and based on the recommendations from Bartlett Tree, come up with a planting plan so that as we remove, we will be replacing with the right species in the right location. It might not always make sense to do a straight replacement, depending on the reasons why the tree failed and you know,
Sure.
road salt and all of that. But I would expect that that's going to be something that'll be coming back to the board and probably the finance committee for requests for funding to begin doing some planting this summer.
If I might comment, I am so pleased to hear this,
Me
because
too.
this has been on my agenda for years, and currently working on, and was at a meeting last evening for a memorial for Al Dodge, who's the longest-serving tree warden in the state of Massachusetts, Commonwealth of Mass. This is just up his alley, and it's just so fitting. I'm going to suggest, because he was very clever in these ways, why don't you approach National Grid? They take a lot of our trees out, and I don't know of any replacement plan they've had or contribution since Al Dodge did the last walkthrough with National Grid out on 97.
Yeah, on the flip side of that, I'll say that National Grid have been very helpful in handling a lot of our tree removals and reducing our budget for that. So they haven't helped with the planting, but they certainly have helped with the removals.
Maybe they've got some
Mhm.
department that contributes in some nice way.
The tree department, John, I'm sure.
Did you have something, Jack?
Yeah, just quick, so that, the only thing I know about trees, which is
That's
next to
correct.
nothing, is that some wise person who knows about trees told me that in the future, you shouldn't plant the same variety of tree, oak, maple, or whatever, because inevitably a disease comes along from Asia or someplace else and kills them all, and so, of that particular variety. So you should plant different varieties along
Yeah,
different
that ash
species.
tree disease is just taking out all
The
the
elm,
ash.
Dutch elm, et cetera, et cetera.
Before
yeah.
that.
And that, the other is that perhaps we can look at a reserve fund called June 1st, it's not that far away. And if it doesn't snow again, or, you know, it shouldn't snow anymore anyway. it's just
Let's hope so.
I don't know, you know, if we don't have any major storms like this one, you know, that is going to take down trees. So if we have $25,000, $50,000 left over in the reserve fund, perhaps we can earmark that this year, in this fiscal year, to basically make a larger dent in the tree restoration, I'll call it, for both the cutting down and the planting, we otherwise could afford. And,
That's a great idea, Jeff.
I think we should.
Certainly have not used much of the reserve fund at all this year so far.
Right, so I think we
We've got a
should.
balance over $100,000.
So maybe we can have in our back pocket amount of money and what we would do with that amount of money with the consultant we have, and so we could do something this summer. And we can always encumber that as of June 30th or by July 14th or whatever. Okay.
And the work is going to be of a magnitude that I think it would be useful to bring the plan back here to the board, so folks
Yes,
know.
yep.
We have a little publicity, I guess I'll call it, of socializing of what trees are going to be cut down, sort of what is the plan.
Sure.
It's going to be, people are going to notice this number of trees, so
Yeah.
if we can talk about.
As long as it's on Morgan and Kimball, I don't
Right,
care.
and the fact that they'll be replanted and a stump removal, I mean, it's all stuff that people will be asking as soon as the work
Yeah,
starts.
and, you know, even with a plan to plant, you know, along with removals, that's still, the replacement tree is going to take many years, and it's going to impact the canopy. I mean, there's going to be a real visual
Right.
impact.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and there's,
Taken so many trees out over the last 20 years. So little cut back, so.
Okay, we look forward to hearing more about that.
and the last thing I'll touch on is Pingree Park Tennis Courts. That was obviously discussed at length at the last meeting, and I just wanted to circle back with the board and give a quick update on that. So as we discussed, I reached out to both Hamilton and the schools, primarily the schools, to understand two things really. What their needs were for the tennis teams and whether they had any plans to build courts in the near future. It was on the school committee's agenda at their meeting last week, and essentially the message back was that they don't have any plans to construct any new tennis courts on school grounds in the foreseeable future. But they obviously they've well-attended meeting 2 weeks ago, over 50 participants on the varsity, junior varsity, boys and girls teams. So it's clearly a healthy program in terms of wanting to keep it going forward, and really they need the 6 courts in order to have adequate practice space and be able to host
Well, that
home
said,
matches.
there was some very vocal folks here, the Deb Evanses and Daisha Rubels. I'd like to see them engaged by the town to take a leadership role in this and see how they can help out, not just put it on this board or you or the town to do all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation is probably at a meeting in June, I would expect the board will be kind of just talking about next steps, but I had just heard back from the schools,
So this
frankly, after the meeting had been posted, so just wanted to give an update on that front. And then the other piece was, in terms of the courts at Patton Park, there were some comments made about their condition and potentially needing to be renovated, and really, the answer back there is they're in very good condition. They've have some slight cracks here or there. Those are going to be filled at real short money in the next few weeks. When the contractor's out here, Sean is going to have him give some feedback in terms of longer term concerns, but Sean doesn't have any, he doesn't see any need to do any major work to those courts. And then I guess the other piece that was brought up was the nets themselves, the height or whatever, and they're all regulations, so we weren't really sure what that issue was that was brought up. So there are 3 courts at Patton in good condition. In the meantime, as was touched on a little bit at the meeting 2 weeks ago, the tennis teams found other options to get them through this season. They're at Myopia, they're at the WVIS courts behind the tea house, and that seems to be working out well enough for them. And I think as part of our discussion in June, we'll have to talk about really what our options are in terms of the long-term fix that everybody seemed to feel was appropriate is upwards of $300,000. That's a lot of money, and so maybe there's something to work out, whether it's short or long term, with the tea house courts or perhaps with Gordon as well. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that a fair amount in the months to come.
Good.
That's it.
Anybody else have anything on that? Okay. I may have a chairman's report if we have time, but I'll reserve that and see how the rest of the meeting goes. It's just a short update. But we'll move on to new business. We have what looks like a lot of appointments.
Couple of appointments.
But it is appointment season, and we're starting tonight, and Jack has those.
Yes, so let me begin by saying that I'm not aware that we're appointing somebody that's a surprise or not appointing somebody that would be a surprise either. So if I mispronounce the names as I go forward, please excuse me. Cemetery Commission, Gary Cheeseman. Police Department, Chief Thomas Perkins, Captain Kevin J. DiNapoli, Sergeant Jonathan B. Gray, Sergeant Christopher J. Help me out there, Peter. McShane, thank you.
The next one's harder.
Is it cousin of yours? No, okay. Sergeant Michael, I never get his...
This is.
Yeah. Detective Shane Kavanaugh, Patrolman David T. Marsh, Patrolman Chad Labrie, if I'm pronouncing that right, Patrolman William J. Carney III, Patrolman Michael Chandler. Our reserve officers, Michael F. Perry, Richard J. Sherry, Brian J. Pat, Christopher T. Sanborn, Stephen T. Faranito. Is that close enough? Scott W. Wood, Sean T. Tinsley, I know that last name, Wesley S. Isidoro, Mia N. Cefalo, David Farray, Lawrence M. Nesters, Stephen S. Lovely, John A. Fritas, Renee Perez, Amanda Cetellini, I slowed us over that one anyway. Straffshay Nealand, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, but so Administrative Assistant Susan Hersey, she's been there for years. Animal Control Officer, one and only Stephen Kavanaugh. Animal Control Officers Indigenous, Stephen Kavanaugh. Good luck. Chaplain Dean W. Peterson, Constable. What does the chaplain do for the town, by the way, other than he's on the, do we actually use his services at all? If somebody dies, does he come, and what does he do for the town?
You always stump me, Jack.
He
Oh, you know,
speaks at
huh?
Memorial Day, the Memorial Day
that's
services.
that's separate from the chaplain. So that, he's a member of the, he's a Veterans Committee.
Right.
Before us.
I just want to know what the chaplain does. How much do we pay the chaplain? Never mind. Let's go. Constables, Calvin
I don't
Perkins.
know, would you like the
$2
job?
contract.
I'm not,
I think you're qualified.
I'm not, well,
Well,
I'm not
not
qualified.
certified, maybe is the right word.
Well, whatever, and I'm not up for that. And that liquor agent, Kevin J. DiNapoli, excuse me. Keeper lockup, Shane Kavanaugh. Police matron, Susan Hersey, Kathleen Tinsey, Mia Cefalo. Fire department, a bunch of people. Firefighter. Captain and Fire Prevention Officer Jeffrey Baxter, Captain Daniel Sullivan, Lieutenant Thomas Curran, Lieutenant Gary Blaney, Lieutenant John Joyce, Lieutenant Christopher Jones, Acting Lieutenant Michael Binns, Senior Firefighter William Jones. Firefighters: Richard Bertone, Denzel Berth, Benjamin Blanchett, Jason Braley, Thomas Curran Jr., Samantha Curran. Are they related, by the way? Brother and sister. That's good. They show up at the same time?
And the father's lieutenant.
Yeah, it's a family affair
So
there.
it's a
Okay.
threesome.
She's graduated from the academy this spring.
Yeah. Robert Gallen, help me with that last name.
Gallinelli.
Ellie.
Son McCarthy, David T. Marsh.
Tell he's not Italian,
Yeah, I should give you those names.
Italian.
I'll take the Irish ones. Erica. Thank you. Michael Reynolds, Michael Schroeder. Okay, Leonard Tunenberg and William Wiles. Provisional firefighters, Stephen
Trackus.
Very good. Derek Marshall, Anthony Nickus, and Ryan Scarrett.
We're going to skip that one.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, we're going to skip that one.
Yeah.
Kill that one. Apparently, he won't be long with us or something like that. The chaplain, Michael Duda. Did they rotate the chaplain at all? At this,
No.
It's like,
Father B was chaplain.
not like in the
for as
Congress where they
long as he
made
was
you for
there,
2
right?
years and, and made it around? No? So Michael Duda's going to be there forever? Is that the idea?
As long as he wants to be.
Until he,
Yeah.
Yep.
is he blessing, is it, okay, okay.
Yeah, you're right.
All but in respect to Jeffrey Baxter, and that 2-day, okay, that's all the appointments before I get to the liquor licenses. I don't want to mix the two.
Approve everything in one motion.
Yeah, so we need some motions on those.
I move that we make them.
Okay.
That's abbreviated. Well,
Second.
No, wait a minute, there's a motion back.
There's
no-
actually
There's a
3
motion.
motions. One for the
There's
cemetery,
3
one for the police, and one for the fire.
I think you can just say from the
Okay.
list below for the.
From the
police
list
and fire.
below.
So you should
Gary's
have
the
one for
first.
Gary.
Why don't you make the motions, Peter? Go ahead.
I don't think I can do that.
Do you want me
You
to?
can make them, you don't have to vote on them. You
Want me to
can-
make
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
motions?
Somebody
Okay.
do it. Somebody step
I
forward
move to
here.
appoint Gary R. Cheeseman to the Cemetery Commission for a term beginning May 15, 2018, ending June 30, 2021.
Second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Are we going to go through every one of these like that?
No,
No.
because then what I'm going to do, here's my proposal.
Wasted my time.
No, you
Jack.
didn't, because we can say, I move to appoint the Wenham Police Department from the list below, which has just been read by Jack,
Takes half of
for a
the-
1-year term beginning July 1st, 2018, and ending June 30th, 2019. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in
Nope.
favor?
Aye.
And then we'll do the same thing with the third one for the fire. I move to appoint the Wenham Fire Department from the list below, as read by Jack, for a 1-year term beginning July 1, 2018, ending June 30th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
There we go. That was the appointments.
Congratulations, everybody.
In case you wonder why Jack's so antsy,
No, John. Please, John.
Yeah, we don't
My
want the
house
whole
gets
town
broken
to
in,
know.
John. You're going to pay for it. I have a house sitter there too, by the way. You're going to scare the living crap
And
out
a
of
big
him.
dog. Okay, next on our agenda is liquor license request. Oh, it's me.
That's right.
Okay, so we have two one-day liquor license requests from Kathleen Feldman, Wenham Museum private fundraiser, Tuesday, June 5th and Wednesday, June 6th, 2018, from 5 to 7 p.m. As far as I can see, all the appropriate information is in the packet. I'll make the motion, and if anyone wants to discuss it further, we can. I move the Board of Selectmen approve 2 one-day all-alcoholic beverages liquor licenses for Kathleen Feldman and a private fundraiser to be held at the Wenham Museum, 132 Main Street, Tuesday, June 5th and Wednesday, June 6th, 2018, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Second the motion.
Is there any discussion about that? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I'm on a little bit of a roll here. So the next thing that we have on our agenda is an overview of the recently performed Fire Chief Assessment Center results. We have with us a gentleman from Municipal Resources, Inc., who was the consulting firm that did this assessment, Mr. Robert Craig. I'll introduce you and ask you to come up to the podium, please, so that our vast viewing audience will be able to see and hear you.
Okay.
And perhaps you can just walk us through an overview.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you for coming.
And the letter I'm going to read from was actually prepared by Brian Duggan, who's our Director of Fire Services. He sends his apologies. He would have been here tonight. I'm here in his place. As you stated, my name is Bob Craig. I'm a senior consultant for MRI, and I was involved in this assessment process, so I am familiar with it. So the letter is to Mr. Lombardi, and it states that on May 9th, our firm delivered a 5-station assessment process for the position of fire chief in the town of Wenham to a single candidate, Acting Chief Stephen Kavanaugh. The assessment process was delivered and scored by a team of 3 Massachusetts Fire Service professionals. Each member of our team has served or is serving as a Massachusetts fire chief and has delivered more than 50 similar assessment processes. This assessment center consisted of the following 5 exercises. First was a tactical exercise, which is basically a fireground management exercise. Then there was a superior subordinate staff exercise. Then there was a customer service exercise, followed by development of a written assignment and development and delivery of an oral presentation related to a fire service innovation. At the conclusion of each exercise, our team individually scores the candidate. Scores are then combined and averaged to develop a consensus-based score. The table below reflects the candidate's overall assessment center score, and in that table there's just one name, of course, the acting chief, Stephen Kavanaugh, who achieved a total percentage score of 68%. During the assessment process, it was apparent that the candidate excelled within the realm of customer service, performed adequately during the tactical component of the process, and could work to enhance his knowledge, skill, and ability relating to personnel management, development of written material, and presentation ability. And then he signed it off, contact me with any questions, but I'm here for any questions, so.
Questions? Anyone have questions? No questions? Okay. Can you tell us, and I know, I just have one question. I know that you can't give us specific information.
Sure.
But can you tell us in general what these exercises would consist of? Like
Sure.
A little bit, flesh those out just a little bit more to the extent that you can without compromising what
Sure, sure. And you're correct, I can't give out a lot of detailed information of it. Some of it's relative to the candidate, some of it's relative to kind of a proprietary information that we deal with as we conduct these assessment centers. But going down the list, the tactical exercise is conducted, and in this case, it was a fireground incident. But a tactical exercise is conducted using a computer simulation that projects an image on the screen, and then the candidate reacts to a series of questions relative to that scenario. It takes about a half an hour to simulate the actual incident that they're exposed to. Superior subordinate staff exercise, that's what's commonly utilized for officers on many different levels, but in this case, a chief officer, as to what he or she might encounter dealing with labor relations or personnel management of subordinates. Customer service exercise is basically dealing with citizen concerns or complaints to the fire chief. Development of a written assignment, and the written assignments vary in magnitude, once again, based on ranks. And I can't tell you in detail what written assignment was given out, but it's often tied with also with the last portion, which is an oral presentation relative to that written assignment. So the candidate works for a period of time during the day, preparing that and then giving it to us for evaluation, but also presenting it. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Yeah, that is very helpful. And how long does this entire process last?
Well, each one of those exercises, the tactical is about a half an hour. Superior subordinate runs for about actually 20 minutes to a half an hour. Customer service is generally about 20 minutes to a half an hour. The written and the presentation is about 15 minutes. The written assignment is utilized during the daytime when the candidate is not in the other room that we utilize. They have time to work on this written assignment. They're working on their own. In this case, we were just dealing with one candidate. In many cases, we're dealing with 5 or 6 or 8 candidates during the course of a day. So they're rotating between different exercises. Yes, sir.
It seems like an awful short amount of time to evaluate someone on such a large scale set of circumstances that can come in dozens of forms of fashions. I mean, I've never seen a 40-foot tower of gas flame as we had down here just recently.
Sure.
That's got to be completely different than a barn fire or
Yeah, are you speaking specifically about the tactical exercise that
well,
they'd be
no, not
faced with?
tactical, just the whole
day?
the whole day and each of the 5.
5, yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there sufficient amount of time to truly evaluate
Well,
someone?
as I say, if we were evaluating more than one candidate, they would be there for the entire day working on various aspects, and then would be rotated into the various stations. But yes, those are
Usual time
those are
frames,
usual times that we use all the
whether
time.
there's 5 or 1.
Right. They each get the same amount of time to respond to the various scenarios. They each get the same amount of time to prepare for each one of these exercises.
All right. The second question I have is there's 3 aspects to firefighting. There's the firefighting, building and structure fires. There's the accident calls
Sure.
that they're usually first on. And now we have our own ambulance service. Were all components of that involved in your
Well,
program?
the simulation could have, it could have been, well, various exercises kind of tied into some aspects of each one of those. But once again, these exercises were, we normally have about 14 different types of exercises that we can do. These were selected primarily to test the skills and abilities of someone at the rank of fire chief.
Right. And then just the last question I have is, it's very different, the town of Wenham, as a good friend of mine calls it, Mayberry RFD,
Okay,
versus Boston,
Sure.
versus Salem,
sure.
and huge departments.
Sure.
Is there compensation given to the fact that it's a different environment, it's a different community, it's probably a lot of different type of fires than...
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The scenarios that we utilize are chosen to replicate what you would normally be faced with in your type of community. In other words, some type of departments, you know, I was just down in Connecticut doing a similar process, and we're dealing with high-rise buildings. Obviously, you don't have that here. So the scenario was chosen based on what you have in the community. Also, as candidates begin the scenario, they are told, and it's equivalent to what they would normally have or expect to have responding to an incident.
Just if I can jump on a little bit of detail on that, John. So MRI was provided with specific information about our town and our department relative to personnel, what their responsibilities were, the mixture of call versus full-time staff, the command structure, where the hydrants were, all of that information so that they could use that when they developed the exercise.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Craig? Thank you very much. So that's our summary of the results. We do have an executive session later. Merit pay is, wow, I get 3 in a row here. Preliminary recommendations on FY18, the greatly anticipated merit pay for non-union employees, and proposed salary range changes for select grades, work that Peter has done, and we'll ask him to report on, please.
Okay, so just looking back a bit to give context, the town, this board approved a compensation and classification schedule for non-union employees back about 2.5 years ago now. And at the time, those developed grades and salary scales that reflected both internal and external equity for all of those non-union positions. Last year, there were 25% salary ranges for each grade, each position, but no steps in particulars last year, and that was a recommendation of the consultant originally, was to have some ability to progress within those ranges for employees besides just following the COLA process. So last year, the board agreed to implement a merit pay system that would allow up to 2% increases for non-union employees, benefit eligible, so full-time, 20+ hours a week. Funding was included in the FY18 budget for that, about $28,000 to go to the max 2% for each of those eligible employees. We did have performance evaluation forms previous. Those have been updated as we went through this process for the first time. It's been a long time, frankly, since those evaluations were done. And so at this point, most of the evaluations have been completed, and there's a table in your packet that reflects, based on the results of those evaluations, my recommendations to the board for merit pay increases for each of those individuals. And generally, there's a copy of the form in your packet as well. There are 11 categories this year that employees are evaluated on, either exceeds expectations, meets expectations, or needs improvement. Employees who received a majority, so 6 or more exceeds expectations across those 11 categories, are being recommended for a 2% increase. Employees who received 3 to 5 exceeds expectations, and for the most part met expectations otherwise, are recommended for a 1.5% increase. Employees who got 2 or less exceeds expectations, generally meeting expectations, are recommended for a 1% increase. And then anyone who had 3 or more needs improvements were not recommended for a merit increase. So that's kind of the, you know, the scoring pattern that I looked at in terms of the merit increases. So there are many department heads, but several employees who don't report directly to me. In those cases, I worked with the department head. We met beforehand, came to consensus in terms of a recommendation, and then met with that individual. And those recommendations are what are reflected in the updated schedule. Just process-wise, the funding for those merit pay increases, as I mentioned, it's fully funded for FY18. It's also funded for next year as well. So once those increases are approved, they're retro back to July 1 of this year, and then they take effect going forward, and they'd be added to that employee's base salary. So there are a handful of employees you'll see that have TBD next to their name, and for a variety of reasons, some work more closely with the board or committee, the Water Commission, Board of Assessors, library trustees, etc. So those will be coming on the June 5th meeting, but just in the interest of trying to move things forward, I brought the rest to your attention tonight. The one other, I guess 3 related changes that are also here separate from merit are on grades 1, 2, and now 2A. And those are all based on, initially when the salary ranges for each positions were developed back 2.5 years ago, they looked at, as I mentioned, internal equity being important, but also the comps from other similar communities. So as part of the contract negotiation process over the past few months, we've gotten updated data on those salaries, and based on that data have made adjustments to the ranges for those 3 positions and split out actually the police and fire chief just based on the comps that are out there. So those are all the changes that are in the updated schedule, and I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions? At some point when the TBDs are gone, I would be interested to understand how much of them, what percentage of the money that was budgeted was actually used.
Yep.
Also to show folks that not everyone received the 2%.
Yep. Yeah, and there were, I mean, to summarize, there's a range of the recommended increases. There are several 1s, 1.5s, and 2s. It's not necessarily set across the board.
I guess I just will say that I'm pleased that we are moving towards a process that not only includes internal equity, external equity, but also merit pay. So people who are doing a really great job receive a benefit to that. It is what we, every time we negotiate a contract, look at.
We'll do it more
all of that.
uniformly as opposed to
Yes.
subjective.
Right. We have a lot of data to look at. We
Yep.
have market data to look at. We can compare folks, each other within town hall. So people have asked some questions about that, and sometimes maybe we can get into a little more detail. But without any, if there are no further questions or comments, I'll make a
all set.
motion. I move to adopt the updated compensation and classification system. Do we want to call it a system?
That's the title of the sheet that we've had.
Okay, so the updated compensation and classification system for the town of Wenham non-union employees, including the recommended FY18 merit pay increases and updated salary ranges for grade 1, 2, and 2A as presented by Town Administrator Peter Lombardi. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
I think it was a good job, and that it was needed, and that there's always judgment involved when you're looking at, particularly when we have one-off positions, which is most of the town, compared to some other towns. So there's still a high level of judgment in terms of, and what is the market doing it, but nevertheless, you need some baseline comparisons, and this is a good job. That's all I have to say.
The one other thing that I'll say is that as part of this round of evaluations, I worked with each of those employees on setting goals for FY19. And on next year's evaluation, they'll be evaluated on how they did against those goals. So, yeah, 3 or 4 goals generally for each individual.
Okay, so I don't think we have voted yet. All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
So that's unanimous. I'm looking at the time, and I'm looking at the next agenda item, which is the annual town meeting debrief. And I don't want to punt it again necessarily, but in the interest of time, we do have another executive session and a few other things on the agenda that are time sensitive.
I mean, I'd
I'm
like
going
to
to
give that subject adequate
Right.
coverage,
So,
and I don't want to rush it
okay,
myself.
so I'll make a suggestion that we table that, not table it, what's the right word?
Table.
Table it defer it to a later meeting. That work for everyone?
Reassign.
Okay.
Table's the right word, John, anyway. I'll try to invent
I
a
was
new
always
one.
told
Well,
to be careful using that.
Postpone, table,
Postpone.
defer,
Postpone.
pick your, you know.
We will postpone, but it's an important issue, and I agree, we need to have the time to really talk about it. The next thing on the agenda is timely, so it is important that we talk about that tonight, and it is a review of the draft grant agreement and preservation restriction for the museum regarding Community Preservation Act funds for the Claflin Garish Richards House preservation, and I think
That falls under
John
me.
has that. Yeah.
I guess, I'm not quite sure if I understand this well, it's the authorization for Kristen to apply for grants?
No,
Is
so-
that a guiding document to?
Nope.
So the Wenham Museum submitted a grant application for CPA funds to the CPC this year in January.
Yep.
The CPC deliberated on the application, ultimately recommended, the original funding request was for $107,000 to a variety of exterior renovations, restoration work to be done to the house. CPC recommended ultimately to town meeting $89,000 of that request. That was unanimously approved by town meeting. And so based on lessons learned from the past few years in terms of these different CPA projects, we put in place a slightly different process this year. So what that meant was when any of the applicants submitted their request this year, they acknowledged the fact that they would have to enter into a grant agreement with the town in order to receive those funds.
There goes the firehouse, guys.
Really, this is exactly the time they said was going to be the peak. Good job, weather.
Yeah.
Wow,
That was a good
Getting
one.
closer.
Yeah.
a good one. I wouldn't sit too close to that window.
And
Maybe null and void if you.
so the museum signed off when they submitted their application that they would enter into this grant agreement. It's just to make very clear what the expectations of the town is, what the obligations of the recipient of the funds are.
Applied for X, and are you using them for X?
Correct. There's reporting requirements. I think a key component for certain projects, this one being one, is that there's a requirement to enter into historic preservation restriction on the facade of the property. That was something that was much discussed in the past year about a different project. And so just in terms of the mechanics of it, at this point, and I will also say, there are sample grant agreements and preservation restrictions on the CPA or on the CPC website. And so the applicants this is not substantially different from what they saw in terms of the what eventually they'd be signing off on. So the Wenham Museum is eager to get the work done. So they had
An ambitious timeline on it.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, they're trying to get the work done this construction season. And so in order to do that, they had asked that we have the board review the grant agreement and preservation restriction, just kind of generally. And so we could submit it to them. They have 2 board meetings in the next few months, end of May and then end of June. So the idea was that at their board meeting, the end of May, they would have an opportunity to go through what we sent over to them, express any concerns, reservations, proposed edits, changes, etc. We would then review those June 5th and potentially June 19th before their next meeting, which is the end of June, because they don't normally have board meetings in the summer. Scheduling is always difficult, and again, they're trying to move along with their process. So based on the application, Town Council had drafted up this grant agreement, and I think probably the most important detail at this point is that there is as written, the preservation restriction on the facade would be a perpetual restriction. And given the fact that they're trying to move the process along, we did not withhold release of funds until the restriction is recorded with Mass Historic, because that can take several months, and we didn't want to hold them up. So basically, what the language is right now is before the release of the final balance of funds, the retainage, if you will, we would have to have the restriction in place.
So this is an opportunity for us to just review this, make sure that we're basically okay with it, so
Right.
that it can go to the Wenham Museum Board.
Yep.
And then back to us for final approval.
So there's no
Potential edits.
voting on it.
No, it's
On
just,
this one.
it's really just, you know, making sure
Christine, you
that
haven't seen this? Has she seen it yet?
no, so this is
Oh.
You're going to send
one,
it to her tomorrow then, right?
correct.
Great.
I know they're having a board meeting Thursday. I don't know if that's on the agenda or not, but,
I think she said May 24th was the date that she had
Okay.
given, I think is the date I have in my head.
It looked, I don't want to say
24.
boilerplate, but having seen one or at least one of these before, this looked fairly,
Boilerplate.
fairly similar to other grant agreements that I've seen. So I have no problem with it as written. And hopefully the museum won't either.
Okay.
Anything
All
else?
set.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Peter.
we will move on. I have no other matters. Because I'm anxious to talk about our last executive session, I'm also going to suggest that we postpone approval of the minutes until our next meeting, unless someone feels strongly about that. Okay.
No, that's fine.
I just received, Catherine sent me, I was prepared to talk about the April 24th minutes, but not the last 2 I got yesterday and the day before. But I
Okay,
will by the
so
next
we'll
meeting.
just wait for the next meeting and
Yeah, I
do
have some
them all together.
minor changes to that. They were otherwise well-written, and Peter has a couple of suggestions for me as well. I've rejected most of them, but I'm still evaluating a couple of them.
Make them feel like you're at least looking at them. Okay, so we'll have all of the minutes for 3 or 4 meetings ready for our next meeting. With that, we've completed the open session portion of the meeting, and I will make a motion to return, I guess, or to go to a new executive session. I move the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, in this case, the acting fire chief. Is there a second?
Second.
And to adjourn after the executive session. So we need a roll call vote, yes?
Aye.
Return to adjourning. To adjourn.